The issue of small boats has been, it was there in the last government and it's going to be here now. And as the summer months approach, as we're well into the summer, the better weather will encourage more migrants to cross the channel. So Labour is going to look significantly responsible for a surge in small boats rather than a reduction of small boats. Actually, there's already been a surge in 2024, despite the rhetoric of the last government. So I'll come to that. I'm going to make two videos. I'm going to make one video now about the general principles, and then I'm going to make another video about what Yvette Cooper has done today. And I did this earlier, and I didn't have the sound on, so apologies. But the basic problem is that the small boats, there are a mix of policies, and they are deeply confused. The UN has proposed tackling smuggling networks and expanding safe routes. So those two things together. And the Labour Party has argued in favour of better deals with Europe that would allow Britain to return migrants to countries that they previously passed through rather than their country of origin. Well, that means effectively a new version of Dublin 3, which is the thing that Lord Frost didn't think was worth keeping. A new version of Dublin 3 means a much closer relationship with Europe. That will take, I think, significantly more than months. I think that will take years to effect. So that is a long-term solution. And the short-term solution, in the last 5 years, the number of people crossing the channel in small boats has risen sharply. Now, there are two issues there. Number one is the safety, because the channel is significantly more dangerous than crossing the Mediterranean. Many of those people who are crossing the channel have already done one crossing. They've already crossed the Mediterranean. They've taken their lives in their hands. So no amount of Rwanda nonsense is going to deter these people from doing it again. And with the reassurance of the smugglers and the traffickers, they feel impelled to get into those boats and to make that crossing. And once they have left the shores of France, it's very difficult for the French to pull them back without looking like Greeks. And I have personal experience of both talking to migrants, of seeing some of the Greek stuff at first hand, and of being involved in helping to helping in a court case against the Greek Navy, which was indulging in a thing called pushbacks. In France, it's called pullbacks, but it amounts to the same sort of thing, threatening the people in the boat to get back in the water, keeping them in the water, or in some cases using guns, machine guns in the case in 2001 that involved my partner. And so I have good reason to pour scorn on the efforts of Suella Braverman, James Cleverly, Theresa May, Priti Patel, who have been dealing with this in the past. And the hostile environment, together with the absurdity of the Rwanda scheme, work together to produce a nonsense that is then compounded by the example of Greece, which still goes on, and people are still dying in the Mediterranean, and the example of Greece is then picked up by Italy and Spain. Pushbacks is not the solution. The solution is to stop people getting in the water in the first place, and that's about humanitarian values. Then about our security, that's a separate issue, and today we heard a little bit about that, as I'll deal with that in another video. The issue of the small boats is complex, it's multifaceted, and addressing it effectively requires a comprehensive understanding of the motivation and the circumstances of migrants, and those are complex. Migrants are not going to be deterred by the threat of Rwanda because they are already living in deterrence. They are already fleeing from either economic or political or physical threat. And the effectiveness of current policies needs to be understood within the broader geopolitical context. Migrants coming across the Channel in small boats primarily come from countries such as Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Albania. So although there has been some progress in returning Albanians to Albania and having a better relationship with Edi Rama, not helped by Suella Braverman's rhetoric, it still doesn't really solve the major problem, which is the poorer communities in the north of Albania, in the mountains, who are still prey to the smugglers, and no amount of posters deterring and threatening Rwanda are going to deter people who see Britain as a solution. Why is it a solution? Mostly because they've been taught English. We have been so successful in the EFL department that migrants don't speak French, they don't speak German, but they do speak English. So, of course, they want to travel to the closest English-speaking country where they can use those skills that they've got, together with the skills that are being called out for in this country, the skills of labouring, building, and so on. So, and also, there is a healthy black economy, which the last government really didn't want to address. Migrants crossing the Channel will continue to cross the Channel unless we deal with the problems in the source countries, which means in Afghanistan we have to have safe and legal routes. In Iraq we have to have safe and legal routes probably through Turkey. Many of the people crossing from Iraq belong to the Kurdish community, and many of them therefore belong to the PKK, and would therefore be branded criminals in Turkey because of their association with the Kurdish insurgents. We can't send people back to Iran, so we'd have to send them to a third country. With Albania, as I say, there's no point in having a consular official stationed at the airport because people aren't coming through the airport. So the UK government has implemented a range of deterrent measures which are, broadly speaking, ineffective, including the controversial Rwanda plan, increased border enforcement cooperation with France, and they may have some small impact, but the and the significant reduction in Albanian arrivals is to do with the relationship between Britain and Edi Rama. But the overall effectiveness still remains debatable. And the provisional data from early 2024 shows a 16% increase in crossings compared to the same period in 2023. And that tells us that the deterrence championed by Suella Braverman is piffle. And the statistical manipulation by Suella Braverman, by James Cleverly, is piffle. Yes, the small boats have gone down because the smugglers are using bigger boats with more people in them. More dangerous. Simply from a humanitarian point of view, this has got worse, not better. So all of that Rwanda stuff is complete and utter rubbish. Let's face the reality. It's been rubbish for a long time, but now we have the statistical evidence. 16% increase in crossings because of Suella Braverman's deterrent. It isn't a deterrent, it's encouraging. There's a seasonal pattern in migration, and that seasonal pattern is now going to peak. So Labour can be accused of a surge in migration, to match the beginning of the Labour administration. That's a coincidence simply because of the arrangement at the time of the election. But the Labour Party is going to have to work very hard to convince people of that. And the better weather conditions are going to mean more boats. And the seasonal rise will complicate the political narrative, particularly because of the election. And Labour, now in power, faces criticism regardless of its policy effectiveness, as any summer increase will be portrayed negatively. So there are 4 things that need to be done. 1, to enhance border security and to strengthen cooperation with France and other European countries to tackle the smuggling networks, to improve border surveillance. But that will only, in many ways, that's a bureaucratic issue, and it's not going to seriously affect the number of people who get through. They'll still get through. We'll just know more about them. We need to establish safe and legal routes to get rid of the backlog of people coming from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Iran, particularly, from North Africa, from Syria, from war zones. Safe and legal routes which can be effected without going across the channel. When Suella Braverman was being questioned by Tim Lawton on the 22nd of November 2022, she admitted the channel was the only way for a majority of people to cross to Britain to beg for asylum. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. We have to find better ways, and I suggest that that would involve the building of consular facilities in northern France so people can start their process through a safe and legal route from northern France rather than going through the channel. We need a more efficient asylum processing, which means we need to reduce the backlogs, we need to ensure timely decisions, we need to remove people from asylum limbo and get them into the workforce so they're paying tax. And that might be a better arrangement with Scotland, so that some of these people can be transferred to Scotland to work in Scottish industry. Scotland is calling out for refugees, for migrants. Refugees welcome, said Humza Yousaf, holding a placard back in 2016. We need to take that seriously. And fourthly, we need better international cooperation. In the end, that means a revival of something like the Dublin III Protocol, where we can transfer people back to Europe, back to the country through which they've been travelling rather than the host country. And the only way we can do that is effectively to establish a much closer relationship with Europe. That will not be speedy, because that will effectively be like EU light, and or indeed rejoin EU, which Keir Starmer has ruled out. But the root causes of migration and the resolution and the economic support for the migrants in their origin countries, that also needs to be part of the solution. The small boats is not going to be something that will be very, very quickly solved. It needs a balanced approach of humanitarian considerations with international cooperation. I suggest it needs an international conference to reevaluate the effectiveness of the 1951 Refugee Convention. I am always astonished by people who go to that document and start quoting about travel from the nearest safe country to apply for asylum in the nearest safe country. Well, that may well be the documentation, that may well be the writing in the documentation, but the case history under which it needs to be considered has been defined partly by British judges who have said that 70 days are allowed for travel between the source country and the new host country. 70 days. And so the sort of armchair lawyers who go to the 1951 Refugee Convention and don't bother to read the case history are living in cloud cuckoo land. We need to look at the whole of that and we need to ask whether or not the 1951 Refugee Convention is suitable for the 21st century and for the problems that are facing the 21st century. I think it's not. But only an international conference will sort that out. A clever government would have called an international conference. A clever Conservative government would have called that conference. Rishi Sunak, it should have been the first thing he did. Instead, the first thing he did was to give power to Suella Braverman. Rishi Sunak, in many ways, has been a fool, and that was the height of his stupidity. And that is not in character. What we saw, the character of Rishi Sunak, the true Rishi Sunak, we saw in number 11, and we saw on the day of his resignation. It's a thoughtful, intelligent man, and I don't understand how somebody who has such intelligence, such warmth, can have been so skewed by the spads and twits who infect number 10, and I trust the same thing won't happen to Keir Starmer. So whatever Labour does will be heavily scrutinised, and the scrutiny will depend. The success of the scrutiny will look at the success, and the success will depend on the ability to implement effective, humane policies, to manage the public and political expectations, and to recognise there are short-term and long-term processes involved in finding any solution. I don't think the small boats will be stopping much before the end of this current Parliament. It would take years to deal with the damage left by Suella Braverman.